tall totems, gazing out to sea. 3 tall totems, quiet and still, standing under the tall, dark hill, with their sad, gaunt eyes searching endlessly. The thunderbird, the fish and the bear, and the lone wolf with his aching jaws, all in accord with the Indian laws, all looking out with a wide, frozen stare. 3 tall totems, waiting patiently for the quick tread, the unspoken word, waiting for the voice that is never heard, waiting in the silence by the lone gray sea.
Mildred Valley Thornton was an adventurous, driven, outgoing, fun-loving, somewhat unorthodox individual.
Who was Mildred Valley Thornton? A very passionate, a very determined, and aggressive individual, aggressive insofar as the determination to achieve what she set out to achieve.
She is an important early Canadian female painter who was adept with both watercolors and oils, and adept with portraits as well as landscapes.
Unmistakable, her work. You can spot it anywhere.
She's perhaps best known for her portraits of Indigenous Canadians. She completed approximately 270, an amazing feat.
And you can see in her brushstrokes always that speed and spontaneity.
I think the Coast Salish artist Floyd Joseph says it best when he says she painted the landscape of time.
Years ago, I began to paint Indians of Western Canada. Their legends, their art, their history, their way of life and spiritual concepts first commanded my attention, and then my enduring respect. I make no apologies for appearing before you in regalia made by my friends for this lecture tour. I wear it as an acknowledgement and a celebration of the original Canadians to whom we owe so much.
I wrote the word conflicted. I wrote, conflicted, that's how I feel. I mean, everybody thought that way, though, that we were a vanishing race and Native people weren't going to exist anymore. But I think the intangible aspects of cultural property that she inherited from us or was gifted were ways that our people tied themselves to her. She was thought of as a friend in our community. I think in that respect, it's good. I'm not one to ever say I knew what was really going on, because I don't. But from my position as a Squamish person and the descendant of someone that she painted, I'm overwhelmingly feeling really positive about it. The conflicted aspect is just more overall to do with the history of our country. So this village is Homalchiston. We were on the waterfront. The city said, oh no, wait, we like that land. We're gonna push you in more. So they pushed us over more. And they said, oh wait, we wanna build the railroad. We're gonna push you in more. Homalchiston means fast-moving water, and it's because of the Capilano River. I used to go down to watch the guys fish at the end of the Cap River, and they'd steal shopping carts and they'd throw them in the river and flip it on its side, and the fish would fly in a trap, and then they'd snag it. And people would be like, oh, those natives are so, like, you know, dirty and poor, and look what they're doing. And it was like, I actually know what they're doing. They're feeding their families. When I read that Chief Floyd Joseph quote, I thought, oh, wow, my relative really hit it on the nose with that one. And it's fascinating if you think about the landscape of time and the historical reference of what were the people doing here in the long ago since time immemorial, and what are we doing here now? You know, it's like, that's really freaking powerful, because we haven't left. We just got pushed.
Mildred was born Mildred Stinson, and she was born to a large farming family in the Dresden area of southern Ontario. She went to Olivet College in Michigan to study art. That college was unusual in that it was open to students of all genders, races, and social status, and it also stressed community activity. And so those influences stayed with Mildred for the rest of her life.
Mildred moved to Regina in 1913. She started teaching art while she was there, and it was while she was there that she really became associated with the First Nations. That she was looking for more adventure, more challenges in her life, I think, as much as in her art. It was the beginning of what became her life's mission.
Once you have lived there and felt the beat of its strong heart, the prairie will never let you go, though you may wander to the outermost parts of the world. When I was a young married woman and the mother of twin boys living in Regina, I read in the evening paper that an Indian baby had been born in a teepee on the fairgrounds. How I should love to see it. So I took my boys, then not quite 3, and we went to the fair. I hesitated outside, not wanting to intrude, but someone spoke to me and I said how much I would like to see the baby. Instantly, the flap of the teepee was thrown open in a gesture of welcome. Stretched from pole to pole was a tiny hammock in which the baby lay, snug and warm. While I was lost in admiration, his mother and others were wildly excited over my children, 2 of a kind, dressed exactly the same. And I had unwittingly provided a treat for them while they had furnished one for me.
I recall staying in Indian encampment at the Calgary Stampede. The Indian children took an interest in us, more of a teasing way in a way, but they were always very gracious. They just thought it was amusing that we found it so interesting to live as they were used to living. One of the Indian gentlemen took it upon himself to make bows and arrows for my brother and I, which we treasured and kept for many, many years. The ones they made for the children were much bigger and stronger than the ones they made for my brother and I, which they figured was all we young white lads could handle.
I took them with me whenever I could. I had to paint with one eye on the canvas and one on the children. When they grew older, my husband managed to fill in the gaps at home while I was away.
This was very unheard of at that time. Wives, mothers stayed at home after they had their family. Mildred didn't see it that way.
The one sheet anchor we had most of the time was our father, who was a very strict and stern Englishman, but extremely fair and very considerate of other people. My father was always very supportive of my mother.
She would sometimes go for a day, sometimes a week, sometimes 2, sometimes several months.
I was forever torn between 2 loyalties. The inevitable fate of a married woman with both a family and a career to serve.
There's a lot of drama here.
100 years ago, British Columbia was a land of mountain silence. Snow gathered in high places, later to melt and form lakes. At that time, inhabitants were mostly Indians, whose totem poles reached into the sky.
They always call us Indians, like we're not Indians. It just somebody got lost and ran into us.
The white man was quick to realize the wealth of Canada's West. He planned, made cities, and utilized its resources.
Mildred and her husband, John, and their 8-year-old twin boys moved to Vancouver from Regina in 1934. The Depression had ruined John's thriving restaurant and confectionery businesses. They were really broke when they arrived here, and the 4 of them lived in one room of a boarding house for a little while.
When we moved to British Columbia, I discovered Indians of a totally different order.
British Columbia, the Indians. Even the Queen, just when Trudeau went there last time, she said, "How are Indians?" He said, "We don't call them that anymore."
Living in the greatest fish spawning grounds in the world with an inexhaustible food supply obtained with little effort allowed for the development of bold, exciting, and dramatic art among the people of the coast. And these artists were not merely odd people to be tolerated and excused as white artists are. They were among the most important folk in the tribe.
Loggers went into the forests in the remote Queen Charlotte Islands to find a tree from which could be carved a totem pole to be presented to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. The Lieutenant Governor of British Columbia praised the people of the province for undertaking such a magnificent project. The words of Chief Mungo Martin, world-famed totem carver, were interpreted by his niece.
Chief Mungo Martin was an artist. He was a great singer, totally traditional. He kept our culture alive. The government at the time seen that the public was coming to watch him, so they built him a little shed. It was almost like a horse shed. My dad moved down in 53. Then when Mungo passed away, my dad took over. He ended up becoming a great artist. He was actually a fisherman, trapper, logger. And I stayed there for 13 years until my father passed away. When I left, I figured that, their job was done. I made Northwest Coast recognized as a world-class art. Mungo made that pole so that the Queen and the world would understand, and that's the way he was. He wanted everybody to know what was going on, that our people are here.
It has been a sincere pleasure to meet and befriend many of these talented individuals, such as Mr. Mark Spence of the Haida people, a carver. I helped to solicit interest in his work, and our frequent correspondence was a delight to me. This is Mrs. Mary Dick from the Thompson River, a famous basket maker. And here is Matthias Capilano, the Squamish chief. Almost any time you visit Matthias, you may see a great totem being carved.
Mildred would just take herself off and go to whatever community she thought she could get to, and she would travel there any way she could get there. She didn't drive, so she would go by car if somebody else drove her, or by bus, or by train, or on foot, or by canoe.
She just went out of her way to reach these people no matter what.
If they didn't speak English, she would show them that she had money for them and indicate that she would, with her brushes, that she would like to paint their portrait. She would often give them a small gift, or sometimes she would even share her lunch.
She would never expect them to do it for nothing. And as you could probably well know, in those days, in the 20s and 30s, a couple of dollars was a lot more than it is now. And my mother was never a wealthy person.
She would make a quick charcoal sketch, and then she would paint furiously for sometimes 25, maybe at the most 60 minutes. And she seemed to always communicate well with the people that she painted and enjoy their company. She made friends with some of the people that she painted.
Here's another good friend of mine, Mr. Isaac Jacobs of the Squamish people, an ordained minister of the Indian Shaker Church and a man of unexampled industry.
Isaac and Lizzie Jacobs are my ancestors. Isaac is my great-great-grandfather.
Isaac built a church in his backyard on the reserve, and it is a most unorthodox church in a bleakly orthodox world.
My grandfather went to residential school. His time with his father was limited in his formative years, but what he did share was that he was very instrumental in the Shaker Church and establishing it here within our community.
Services are conducted with delightful informality. If no one comes during spells of bad weather, he and his faithful wife Lizzie might have church together, just the two of them. When a large contingent of people arrive from out of town, the Jacobs turn their home into an improvised hotel.
Indian Shaker Church is known across the Pacific Northwest. It's a beautiful hybridity of our Squamish or our Squamish teachings and practices and protocol infused with Christianity.
Where she lived in Vancouver, which was down in the West End, she was very, very close to the Squamish nation. She was aware of the importance of many of the elders and painted probably around 20 or so Squamish works, many of those have been repatriated.
My late mother was very driven to have the nation acquire the paintings. It was more or less about honoring our ancestors, paying tribute to their legacies, but also having fine art, depicting them in prominent places within our nation's offices. She worked to acquire the paintings and then have an exhibition of them. We did that at the West Vancouver Museum and Archives. West Vancouver Ambleside Beach is known as Chetlam. That was one of our ancient village sites. My grandfather, who's 83 years old, my late mother's father, he was actually born in a house down there. Showing those pictures in that space, in that museum, was a pretty pivotal moment of making almost a political statement to the district of West Vancouver, but then also showing the local residents this is why it's important to acknowledge Squamish's presence here and all of these faces of these really prominent people.
Mostly I have gone alone and independently on my travels, meeting with unfailing kindness and hospitality. I found that in this field of art, you have to seize every opportunity when offered and pour every ounce of energy into one supreme effort. Your own comfort and convenience simply do not matter.
These matriarchs and patriarchs of our nation, those are the people she was painting, not just anybody. These are like, these were like the top people, high-ranking in terms of intangible cultural property and all of like the masks, the songs, the connections to our spiritual ways. They carried those rights. These men and women carried, and like that part is like, whoa. So when you see those paintings, whatever you think of them artistically, if you think they're beautiful or not, you gotta respect that these are some heavy hitters and some legends.
She really wanted Canadians to lose the barriers that existed between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, and I think she hoped that not only her writings but her portraits would help build bridges.
And she was not there to copy anyone else. And that, well, she used to say to me from time to time, I don't know why everyone's always comparing me to Emily Carr. I don't know why they don't compare Emily Carr to me.
Emily Carr was very, very much the solitary individual. Mildred was as much interested in painting people as she was in meeting people.
Carr hated painting portraits and said it was actually indecent to try to capture a sitter's character, where Mildred just loved doing that and excelled at capturing character.
Mildred was a historical painter. I think she was out to achieve something completely different. I think she probably resented being likened to Emily Carr, or people thinking that she was just a follower of Emily Carr. She wasn't a follower of anybody.
There are some other reasons related to Mildred's disappearance from the scene, so to speak. Part of it was she was an art critic.
Criticizing Lauren Harris and Jack Chabot and the cliché of the day.
During the 1950s and 60s, a lot of the younger and more prominent artists were very interested in experimental art and thought that other art was a little passé. As well, when she was trying to place her collection of Indigenous portraits, some of the institutions contacted important people in Vancouver, and they said the work was of absolutely no value.
It had to go as a singular collection and as her contribution to Canada.
So she wanted to sell it near the end of her life. At that point, she was elderly and very, very ill, and she was asking $200,000, not an outrageous price. And she wanted that money to help her in her old age, but also because she wanted a significant portion to go towards bursaries and scholarships for Indigenous youth.
That's what she wanted, and that's what she expected, and that's what she didn't get, and that's which really made her quite bitter towards the end.
If a lifetime of devotion to Canada means nothing while I am alive, it is better that no record of it remain after I am gone. Take my Indian portraits to the dump, have gasoline poured over them, and let them be set aflame.
Anyone I knew that was interested would say, well, that would be awful to do that. And I don't know, what would be the worst to sort of not fulfill my mother's, what she wanted, or to do what I thought was right. But as you know, the end was that we decided we wouldn't do it.
The worst thing that can happen to an artist, any artist anywhere, is to be taken out of the public eye. As soon as you're out of the public eye, it doesn't take long for people to forget you.
I think her legacy should be that of somebody who was an advocate and really wanted to share our faces and share our narratives.
The will, fortunately and thankfully, was contested by the family, so we're left today with a wonderful, very important collection for all future generations to enjoy.
She thought, I'm going to make it known that these people were here, are here, and paint them in a way that they're humanized, and making them in that form immortal. And that shows history. And yes, it's done from the perspective of a prominent white woman, and there's that lens to it. But nonetheless, she injected Squamish or Squamish people into Canada's history.
Often now, I look back and wonder how I did it all. But I'm convinced of one thing. Given a modicum of health, you can find time for anything you want to do, no matter how many difficulties may confront you. Discouragement, lack of funds, ill health, indifference from others. I knew them all in full measure, but persisted because I was determined to finish the job I had set out to do. Painting the Indians has been a rich experience for me. Many of these dear people are oppressed by frustration and a sense of inferiority. This is what we have done to them. Not the government, but you, and you, and you. Let us determine to undo the ills of which we are guilty. Let us shake off our indifference and apathy and render to these, our fellow Canadians, the full meed of friendship, interest, and cooperation which it is our duty and privilege to give.